They didn't just arrest a man. They may have cracked the silence around everything. That's the claim now sending shockwaves through this case after federal agents reportedly took into custody a figure no one was even watching, the man behind the scenes. Not the headline name, not the face everyone recognizes, but the one who was always there, just out of sight. According to circulating reports, this individual, allegedly linked closely to Joe McCann, was quietly picked up as part of an ongoing federal inquiry. And the timing? It doesn't look random, because just before the arrest, something surfaced. A leaked piece of footage, unverified, unreleased publicly, but reportedly enough to shift the direction of the investigation almost overnight. And that's where the story stops feeling controlled. Because if this footage exists, then it means there are details we haven't seen, moments that were never part of the official narrative, actions that were never explained. Then comes the next layer. Sources now claim that once in custody, this same individual may have started talking. Not publicly, not on record, but enough to suggest that investigators are now looking beyond a single name. And that changes everything. Because if someone from inside the circle is cooperating, then the structure around that circle begins to break. Meanwhile, the person at the center of it all remains out of reach. No confirmed location, no direct statement, just absence. And absence, in cases like this, doesn't calm questions, it multiplies them. So now the focus isn't just on who was arrested. It's on what they know, and how much of it was never meant to come out.
Not too sure what happened. That's what we're trying to find out. I got 2 emails today from the embassy in Zanzibar, and it said the investigation is still ongoing. That we have not determined the cause of death yet at all, and the investigation is still ongoing and still pending right now. So there has nothing official has been released. And that's what we're trying to find out. We just want answers. We just think it's very odd that our daughter is traveling with Joe, and we don't hear anything from Joe. To me, that's very odd. And initial call that she got from Joe was 11 hours after something had transpired in the room. And that's very odd. 11 hours later,
11 hours.
Something had transpired, and Joe just relayed to Yolanda that Ashlee was okay and she was stable and she was okay and don't worry about it.
But that she was at the hospital.
The arrest wasn't the headline. It was the signal that something bigger just shifted. That's how this case is now being described after reports surfaced that federal authorities quietly detained a man who was never supposed to be in the spotlight, the alleged manager connected to Joe McCann. Not a public figure, not a name trending online, but according to sources, someone who may have been closer to the situation than anyone realized. At first, nothing about the case pointed in his direction. The narrative had already been framed. The focus was fixed. The outcome seemed contained. But then something changed. According to circulating claims, investigators began looking beyond the obvious. Not just at what happened, but at who might have been present, who might have known more, and who might have stayed silent. And that's where this name surfaced. Quietly, without warning. Reports now suggest that the arrest wasn't based on speculation. It followed the emergence of evidence. Not fully disclosed, not publicly released, but reportedly strong enough to justify immediate action. And that's where the story begins to fracture. Interview 4:245:07. Because if someone operating behind the scenes is now in custody, then the case may have never been as simple as it first appeared. Sources describe this individual as more than just an employee, not just a manager, but someone who allegedly had access to movements, access to conversations, access to moments that were never part of the official account. And if that's accurate, then his position places him in a space that changes the entire dynamic. Because people in the background often see what others miss. Then comes the detail that pushed everything forward. A leaked piece of footage, unverified publicly, but repeatedly referenced in connection with the arrest. According to claims, this footage may have introduced a sequence of events that doesn't align with what was initially presented. Not confirmed, but persistent. And persistence keeps attention locked. Because if that footage exists, then it means there are moments we haven't seen. Moments that may contradict the version already accepted. That's where the contradiction deepens. The official narrative remains unchanged, structured, direct, and closed. But these new claims introduce movement into a story that was supposed to be settled. And movement creates instability. Because now, instead of one version, there are multiple possibilities.
Being the next chapter of her life. She called us and FaceTimed us to share with us her travel.
Ashlee's mother says she never would have expected that less than a week later, her daughter would be dead. On April 8th, she says Ashlee called saying she and her fiance got into an argument and were moved to separate rooms. The next day, she received another call, this time from her fiance.
He told me that Ashlee did something to herself and that she was being taken to the hospital. I said, what happened when? And he told me it had been 11 hours prior.
Hours later, the luxury resort the couple was staying at called saying that Ashlee passed away.
One that was presented, and one that's still emerging. Sources also suggest that following the arrest, this individual is now being questioned in connection with broader elements of the case. Not just his own actions, but what he may know about others. And that's where the stakes rise. Because if cooperation begins, then silence ends. And when silence ends, narratives shift. There are also indications, unconfirmed but widely discussed, that information provided during questioning may already be influencing the direction of the investigation. Not publicly, not officially, but enough to suggest that attention is expanding. Beyond one person, beyond one moment, towards something larger. Meanwhile, the central figure tied to the case remains unaccounted for. No confirmed location, no direct response, just absence. And absence, when combined with new developments, doesn't reduce pressure, it intensifies it. Because now the case isn't just about what happened. It's about who else might be connected and how long that connection remained hidden. The arrest, then, isn't just an isolated event. It's a shift. A point where the story moves from what was known to what might have been overlooked. And once that shift happens, it's difficult to reverse. Because questions don't disappear when answers are incomplete. They multiply. So if someone from the background is now at the center of the investigation, what else from the background hasn't been fully revealed?
We are noticing a trend here, and it's actually worrying, and we can't continue to ignore it. Yes, we've been saying this for years. Stick with your own people. Stick with your own people. Are our men perfect? No. We all have hangups and stuff that we need to work on, yes. But this trend, yeah, this has been going on for years.
The only thing that's going to change my mind is camera surveillance. This is a very, very high-end villa hotel. There's got to be cameras around.
The footage didn't just raise questions. It redirected the entire investigation. That's how this case is now being described after reports surfaced that a leaked clip, still not publicly released, may have played a key role in the arrest of the man allegedly connected to Joe McCann. Not a public face. Not a name anyone expected to hear. But now, according to sources, a central figure in a story that may be expanding far beyond its original scope. Because before this moment, the narrative felt contained. A sequence of events had already been accepted. A conclusion had already been reached, and the focus remained fixed on a single direction. But this development doesn't fit inside that structure. It challenges it. According to circulating claims, the footage in question doesn't align cleanly with what was initially presented. It reportedly shows movement, timing, interactions that weren't part of the original account. Not confirmed publicly, but repeated enough to raise attention. And attention leads to scrutiny. Because if there are visuals that contradict the established timeline, then the timeline itself becomes uncertain. And uncertainty spreads. Sources now suggest that this is exactly what happened behind the scenes. That investigators, after reviewing new material, began to reassess not just one element of the case, but the entire sequence. That reassessment led to questions. Questions led to names. And one of those names led to an arrest. But the arrest isn't where the story ends. It's where it opens. Because once someone from inside the circle is taken into custody, the focus shifts from what can be seen to what can be said. And according to ongoing claims, that's where things are now changing. There are suggestions, unverified but persistent, that this individual may be providing information. Not in public statements. Not in official releases. But within the scope of an active inquiry. And information, when it comes from someone positioned close to the situation, carries weight.
Is raising serious concerns after influencer Ashlee Janae died during a trip to Tanzania with her fiance Joe McCann, and now police are actively investigating what really happened. Here's a timeline of her final days. Starting on April 3rd, Joe proposed to Ashlee during their trip, and she took to Instagram to post a video of the moment he popped the question. Cameras captured him getting down on one knee at a luxury safari while a lion walked in front of them. The following day, on April 4th, she posted pics of herself and her fiance feeding zebras and standing near a giraffe, and even reshared the shot of him proposing. And on on April 5th, which was Ashlee's birthday, she celebrated on social media with a series of snaps from the trip. You can see a bed of rose petals at her feet that spelled out "Happy Birthday, Ashlee," as she poses with a feeding giraffe. She also shared a clip of her and Joe kissing as the giraffe ate from the bowl next to them. Then on April 8th, things took a major turn. Ashlee's mom, Yolanda, told Philadelphia's WPVI TV her daughter called to say she and Joe got into an argument and moved to separate rooms. They had been staying at a luxury resort, Zanzibar, at the time. On April 9th, Ashlee was found unconscious in her villa and rushed to the hospital, according to a local news outlet. The family tells TMZ Joe waited 11 hours to call them and tell them what happened, which they find a very...
Because proximity matters. It determines what was witnessed, what was known, what was never reported. That's where the hidden layer of this case begins to emerge. Not through official channels, but through the gaps between them. Because if someone with access is now speaking, then details that were previously inaccessible may begin to surface. And once those details surface, they don't just add to the narrative. They reshape it. Meanwhile, the official version remains unchanged. Still structured, still direct, still presented as complete. But now, it exists alongside a growing number of claims that suggest there's more beneath it. And when two versions begin to exist at the same time, one fixed, one evolving, it creates tension. Because only one can hold fully. That tension is now driving the conversation. Why hasn't the footage been released? Why hasn't there been a direct response to its alleged contents?
It was so intense that hotel staff had to separate them in 2 different rooms.
Ever lead me to believe that she would do something to harm herself.
She's out of the country with her boyfriend. She's celebrating her birthday April 5th. Gets engaged to this boyfriend, same trip. From what I could see online, she's actively posting content during this time. Even texting with a friend about the engagement. Then days later found deceased while on that same trip in Zanzibar. After hearing a little bit of what her mom said, I'm not pointing fingers, but shit. It was reported that her and the boyfriend got into an alleged misunderstanding. Now her mother states that sometime after that, security had walked him to the room and that's when they found her. And let's be honest, that is possible, right? Now, obviously, when you put everything together and you're looking from the outside in, the shit looks weird. I really hope all possibilities are explored though. Considering they had to be separated, that means staff would possibly know that she's in that room alone, right? Foreign country, on vacation, beautiful girl, a lot of suspects. Do also want to point out, I've seen a lot of people online saying that her lifestyle is what ultimately led to her fate. Let's be real, that's a nasty ass thing to say. No matter what you believe happened here, nobody deserves that. With that being said, I think all possibilities are on the table. Vacation, birthday trip, proposal, take your own.
Why do new developments seem to be happening behind the scenes without corresponding updates to the public narrative? These are not isolated questions. They're connected. Because they all point toward the same possibility that what's happening internally may not match what's being communicated externally. And that gap is where doubt grows. There's also the issue of timing. Why did this footage surface now? Why did the arrest happen at this stage? Why did attention shift to someone previously unseen? Because timing in investigations is rarely accidental. It often reflects movement, progress that isn't always visible until it reaches a certain point. And this moment feels like one of those points. A transition from one phase of the case to another. From assumption to examination. From silence to potential disclosure. But disclosure hasn't fully happened yet, which means the most critical pieces may still be out of reach. And until those pieces are addressed directly, the narrative remains incomplete. Because if the footage truly changes the sequence of events, if the individual in custody holds information that hasn't been revealed, if the investigation is moving in a direction the public hasn't yet seen, then what we're looking at isn't a finished story. It's a developing one. So if new evidence is already reshaping the investigation behind the scenes, how much of the real story has yet to be told? When the people behind the scenes start getting pulled in, it usually means the story was never what it seemed. That's the stage this case has now reached. Because once reports confirmed that a figure operating in the background, allegedly connected to Joe McCann, is now in custody, the focus didn't just shift, it expanded. And expansion is where controlled narratives begin to lose their grip. At first, everything pointed in one direction. One name, one sequence, one outcome. But now, that direction is splitting. Because if someone who wasn't originally part of the public narrative is now central to the investigation, it suggests that what was initially presented may have only covered part of the picture, not the whole. And that changes how every previous detail is viewed. According to ongoing claims, this individual wasn't just loosely connected. He allegedly had proximity, close enough to observe, close enough to know, and possibly close enough to be present during moments that were never publicly outlined. And proximity creates a problem. Because people who are close to events often hold information that doesn't make it into official summaries. They see transitions. They witness gaps. They notice what doesn't align. That's where the hidden layer of this case begins to surface. Not through confirmed releases, but through what's implied. Because if this individual is now being questioned and potentially providing information, then the investigation is no longer static. It's moving. And movement introduces uncertainty. There are also growing claims, unverified, but persistent, that what's being discussed internally may involve more than just isolated actions. That the situation may include connections, decisions, and moments that extend beyond what was initially described. And while none of that has been formally confirmed, the consistency of those claims keeps them in circulation. Because when the same ideas continue to appear from different directions, they become difficult to dismiss entirely.
Janae, the soft life influencer that has recently passed away. Just a quick summary, she went on a trip to Africa with her then boyfriend that turned into her fiance on the trip for her birthday. She had turned 31 on that trip. She talked to her parents on her birthday, especially after the proposal, but nothing under the impression that she was depressed or wanting to take her life. It has been confirmed that before her death, Janae and John McCann had gotten into an argument after the proposal, but before her death. And it was so much of an argument that the hotel officials had to make a decision, because it was so toxic between the two in their argument, what they needed to do next, that they separated them in separate rooms. Then it was stated by her mother that just did a recent interview with the news source, and she stated that he called her, right, and was like, yeah, something's going on with Ashlee, just to let you know, but wasn't too much in the details with her. She stated that she was trying to ask him for more details in regards to what the hell was going on with her daughter, but he was not giving up any more information than what he gave. She then stated that before she got off the phone with him, she asked him, like, when did all this happen? When did all this take place? And he told her 11 hours prior from him calling her to tell her what the hell's going on. So for 11 to 12 hours.
Then there's the issue of silence. Despite the arrest, despite the reports of new evidence, there has been no full public breakdown explaining how this individual fits into the case. No detailed reconstruction. No expanded timeline that incorporates this development. Instead, what exists is a gap. A gap between what is happening and what is being explained. And gaps, in cases like this, don't stay empty. They fill with speculation, with interpretation, with questions that don't have immediate answers. That's where this situation becomes unstable. Because stability depends on clarity. And clarity isn't increasing, it's being challenged. The original narrative still stands, but it now exists alongside a series of developments that don't fully align with it. An arrest that introduces a new player. Footage that suggests unseen moments. Claims that point toward a broader context. And a central figure who remains out of reach. All of these elements exist at the same time, but they don't connect cleanly. And when elements don't connect, the story doesn't hold, it shifts. That's what makes this moment critical. Not because everything is known, but because so much remains unresolved. Because once a case reaches this point, where new information continues to surface without fully integrating into the official narrative, it becomes something else. Not closed, not resolved, but active. And active cases don't settle quickly. They evolve, they expand, they reveal. Sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. And when they do, they often bring forward details that were never part of the original version. Which leads to the question now driving everything. If someone this close to the situation is only now being pulled into the investigation, what does that say about everything that came before? Everything about this case just shifted, and it didn't happen quietly. A background figure is now in custody, a piece of footage is driving new questions, and the version people thought they understood no longer feels complete. This isn't a minor update, it's a rupture. Cat Williams called out the pattern: stories that close too fast, details that surface too late, narratives that hold steady while the facts around them keep moving. And now that pressure is building. A manager gets arrested. A video is referenced, but not released. A timeline starts to bend under scrutiny. That's not clarity. That's conflict. Because if someone from inside the circle is now talking, even quietly, then information is shifting hands. And once that happens, control over the narrative starts to slip. What was once a single version becomes multiple possibilities, and none of them align cleanly anymore. The silence isn't helping. No full breakdown. No detailed reconciliation. Just the same official structure repeated while everything around it changes. And when the story stays the same, but the facts don't, people notice. Now the audience isn't just watching, they're connecting gaps, questioning sequences, revisiting moments that didn't add up the first time. That's how cases reopen in the public eye, even when they're technically closed. So this is where it stands: an arrest that expands the scope, evidence that hasn't been fully seen, and a central figure still missing while the pressure tightens. Because once the background starts speaking, the foreground can't stay protected forever. If the story was solid, it wouldn't need this much reinforcement. So what exactly are they trying to keep from collapsing?